So, a very good afternoon to all of you, and welcome back to the first session called the Fireside Chat of BiG Conclave 2020. The topic of the session is Igniting the Negotiator in You. I would start with a very basic meaning of negotiation. As we all know, it is a process of settlement of differences through a mutual understanding between both the parties. And these skills are not always inborn. They have to be developed through learning and can be very useful in resolving any differences between the two parties. Now, to ignite the negotiator in you, we have invited two prominent guests who are going to talk about the same. We have Dr. Ajay Churi, who is the founder of SCL and is also the chairman of Electronic Skills Council. Thank you for joining us today, sir. And continuing the session, we have Dr. Saurabh Srivastava, who is the co-founder of NASCOM, IAN, and Indian Venture Capital Association. Thank you for joining us today, sir. As the session moderators, we have Ms. Dipanjita Chattopadhyay, who is the CEO of IIT Knowledge Park. And as the co-moderator, we have our Professor Amitabh Bandyopadhyay. So without further ado, I would hand over the session to both the moderators. Over to you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aditi and Amita, for inviting me to this fantastic session. I must say that all of you know that the BiG Conclave has taken, has evolved into a national forum for startups in life sciences to exchange their ideas and get mentors on the table to learn from them. One of the very important points of any startup deal is, of course, learning how to negotiate. If you can talk your way through, you can really create wonders. We today have two fantastic mentors, Mr. Ajay Chaudhary and Mr. Saurabh Srivastava, here today with us, who has agreed to informally chat with us to understand the skills of negotiation. Is negotiation a science or an art? Is a debate? Can you learn negotiation? How do you actually, probably it is innate in some people. Probably some people learn it through exposure. It may be innate to, but for us, let us actually get exposed and learn from them. So the first question, if I can come to Mr. Chaudhary, to you. Actually, both of you are early stage investors. We know how cash-starved startups are. And in your experience, how often do investors have a run also and dictate? How often do you let startups put their views forth? Or you say, this is what you get, and how do you deal with it? What's your approach to investing in startups?
Well, actually, you have to definitely listen to what the startup is talking about, and we do negotiate. Definitely, we don't in any manner at any time overpower them, because I think we need to give enough respect to startups as a start. And secondly, it depends on the stage. What stage they are. If it's in the early stage, it's different. If it's in the growth stage, is different. And also, sometimes there are issues like other people who are wanting to invest at the same time in the company, because if the company is pretty unique and has a excellent founding team, there are other people who are also wanting to invest in the company. So there may be competition. So we need to take all these issues into account, and definitely we look at the quality of the founder, we look at the quality of the idea, and on that depends how we negotiate and what we want. And we also look at the kind of company that it is there. So, for example, I'm going a little out of scope, but I think it's important for startups to understand that we don't really like single founders. We want a team to come and talk to us. We want a team to work on a particular idea. And we also really don't very much like the idea of husband-wife. Because in a lot of situations, if there are issues between the two of them, the company gets affected. So there are few things that we really would not do. And these are a couple of those that we would not invest.
Mr. Srivastav, what is your view? Because IAN invests as a network, and often also there is syndication that happens. It's just not one, as Mr. Chaudhary mentioned, it's just not one investor, but maybe several investors. What's your view on how you actually let startups negotiate?
So at one level, it's not very different because although we have a number of each of them takes their own individual decisions on whether to invest or not. But the discussion and negotiation with the entrepreneurs is actually handled by IAN and what we call a lead investor. There may be 30 or 40 people investing. They're not all negotiating with the entrepreneur. So at IAN, we have a very good system where the founders actually only see a person who represents, so 40 people don't have the right to tell the entrepreneur.
So this is the volume what we are hearing.
They're going to talk to only one person. But the issues are the same as Ajay was saying. See, there's always a balance. If you're a founder and you have a great idea.
I don't know, Viswa, I just checked the Common Cast event link on my phone, and the volume at my end is coming quite fine.
Aditi, you need to mute.
Okay, so what I was saying is, see, if the founder has a great idea, as Ajay said, we are investors. So they have a need to raise money.
Yes.
We would like to invest. So it's not an unequal relationship if they have a great idea. So secondly, what happens is that angel investors in early stage, Ajay and I, we've also been entrepreneurs. We've been founders. We have raised money. So we understand. We have empathy. We have sympathy. So we can never be unreasonable. Like he said, we respect. Of course, we respect founders. And secondly, we will only succeed in our investment based on how the founder does. We're not going to run that company. So we're not what is often termed vulture capitalists. We're not going to run the company. We have no intent. So all of us we no longer have a desire to create and run companies. We're trying to create more companies. So there is a balanced relationship. But yes, I think the founders need to know and learn how to have that discussion. So I do disagree with Amita when she said that, the negotiation, you may or may not be born with it, whatever. We negotiate from the day we are born. We want something to try, and we get it. We are kids, we throw a tantrum, and we get it. We are negotiating with our mothers. That's an easy negotiation. You will always win. But you come out to this world, you do need to understand what you should want. And I would say I put it in 3 ways. See, when you go into a negotiation, you must have 3 things in mind. What do you need? So what must happen? What you have to get. The second is what you would like, what you want. It's not as strong as a need, but you would like. And the third is what can you live with? Fourth, of course, is if third doesn't happen, then you walk away. But you need to have that sense of balance. And when you're negotiating, there may be 10 points of negotiation. Valuation, amount of money, control, all the rest of it. Yeah. I think in all of this, you must be if you're clear of your first, those three things: need, want, and what you can live with. You need to understand that you can't win everything. So while it's important to know how to negotiate to win, it's also important to know when you should lose, when you should agree to lose. Because if you don't lose on some things, it's a problem. You know, I mean, there is that saying that the person who wins the maximum arguments has the least friends. So you need to have that balance. You know, where do you
So, can I just come in and say that let's do a thought experiment. Both of you were entrepreneurs. There was once where you were like a real fledgling startup. If you are an early startup now and raising capital, and you received a term sheet from Ajay Chaudhary and Saurav Srivastava, which terms you would negotiate on? What terms would bother you? And what will make you walk out of a deal? You said that some things are must have, some things are good to have, and some things you can live with. What are those terms that you'll just say, I'm walking out?
I would say, you know, if you're an entrepreneur and you have a term sheet from Ajay and me, you should just say yes and go on.
Oh, no. You're not allowing him to negotiate. Come on.
No,
Yes.
no, because he would give you a fair term sheet. But more seriously, coming to that, see that the things, there are multiple things, right? There's the issue of valuation.
Yeah.
We've been entrepreneurs, we've been investors. If you're an entrepreneur, the valuation that investors give you is never right. When I was an entrepreneur, I never felt I was valued well, always. When you're, so you're going to have that viewpoint, you'll have that difference. But do realize that you can determine whatever is your valuation. But it's the value at which you can get an investment that's your real valuation. I can sit at my house in Defense Colony and say, this is worth 100 crores. But if I only get buyers at 25, then that's the value. So you must understand that one. The second is on valuation. You have to think of the bigger picture. You can own 100% of a company that only grows to 10 crores, or end up with 10% of a company that's worth 10,000 crores. So if you need money, you need money. Yes, you should negotiate valuation. But at some point, if you can see that that's all that's happening, either you go to another investor, and if you go to 3 investors, they are all valuing you the same, that is your value. So I think you shouldn't walk away just because, you know, there's a mismatch in valuation, because there always will be. I mean, secondly, I would advise this thing on walking away. Do some research on the investors you're talking to, because every investor may give you the same term sheet, same shareholding agreement. Check their record, because both may give you the same agreement, the same terms, same conditions, but one would be more empathetic, would have a track record of never having enforced those provisions, and another one would have the record of doing so. So check on that issue. But the thing I would worry about as an entrepreneur is, well, can I get fired without cause, even if I'm doing well?
You're talking of doing a due diligence, just as you as an investor would do due diligence, you want the startups to do due diligence on the investors as well. Mr. Chaudhary, where do you think you would do? How as a startup, which terms would bother you apart from valuations?
See, the first thing I would suggest to a startup is that before you walk into the room for a negotiation, please keep your ego outside the room. A lot of times, very highly technical people who are wanting to get an investment have such a lot of pride in what they have created that they also carry a chip on their shoulders about the whole product or a solution. I think that's the first thing that they should realize, that keep it outside. Don't have any egos. And at the end of the day, what you're really wanting is a win-win situation. There's not going to be one loser and another loser. No, it isn't going to be like that. It will be win-win. And I think the critical aspect that everybody worries about is valuation. But I always say valuation is a concept. At the end of the day, you should worry more about what the investor will bring to the table. And that's where I agree with Saurabh, do a lot of due diligence on the quality of the investor. And that quality of the investor will tell you whether they really support startups or they don't. Do they bring all their networks to the fore? Do they help in hiring? Do they help in growing? Do they help you in getting the next exit? They already planning ahead of time for your next money. All of that is what the good investor does. So that is what they should look at. And then there are, of course, legal points like board composition, veto issues, rights of the investors who need to be keep in mind. Investors like to have preemptive rights sometimes, which might not be very good. And, vesting for the founders. There are some legal issues like anti-dilution. Those are the kind of things that you need to also be very clear about. And also, investors need to save their money. They can't also just put money and say, and forget about it. They want to make sure that they have proper support from the document, which will take care of liquidation preference. So these are sort of the critical points that I would look at in a term sheet. And the rest is all about, getting the best value for your money and ensuring that a lot of times I've seen that to get a better valuation, a startup will overplay numbers. Don't do that. Be very careful that you look at your numbers carefully. And as a matter of fact, we all number of times tell some of our startups, please go redo your numbers because your numbers are looking too big. They are not going to happen. And, they want to make it look big because they want better valuation. So, they get misled by such thinking. So those are the kind of things you have to worry about. And also look at what is your real requirement over the next 12 to 18 months. Just don't put a number there that I want so much. Just look at your requirement and say, this is what I need. And do a proper sensitivity analysis to say, will I achieve those numbers? And lastly, there will be issues like nobody is going to give you all the money in one tranche. Most times people will say, I'll give you multiple tranches. And those multiple tranches are actually connected to your milestones of achievement. That's really where I'm talking about, that make sure that your numbers are done properly. And you do enough sensitivity analysis to make sure that you will achieve those numbers and your milestones will then enable your tranches.
And I would just add one thing to what Ajay is saying. You see, many founders, when they come, they've been running the company themselves. And it's almost like their personal property. Now, you need to recognize that when you get an early stage investor, it's no longer your own, just your company. You have a partner. Somebody else has money in it. There's no collateral. If you die, they die. They are partners. So you can't treat it in the same way. So very often in India, there's been a tendency to have like a proprietorship, personal expenses, company expenses, they're all treated the same. A lot of investors, early stage investors, worry about it. And some of the conditions they put are largely to teach you to separate what's a personal expense and what's a corporate expense. And why do we do tranches? Because when you're a very early stage investor, you haven't had the money. If you have too much money, you will blow it in the wrong things. We have had innumerable examples and experience. First thing you do is build a fancy office. You do a Now, we are not running a company. We are not there every day. We don't want to be there every day, right? But what will happen is you'll run out of money. Then you'll be in trouble. so to some extent, some of the conditions recognize that early stage or angel investors support is also for your benefit, including the insistence saying, look, you must have a good auditor. We don't want you to get your family friend as an auditor. You just take from what you do. Because a good auditor helps you think through the information that's good for your policy. So when you look at all those conditions that are in term sheets, well, more in shareholder agreements, they are, yes, of course, some of them are meant to protect investor interests, but they're also put there to ensure good corporate governance. And there is data which says that companies that are funded, externally funded, VC funded, research funded, actually do perform much better than those that haven't, largely because you bring in disciplined corporate governance. I'm not talking of all the mentoring on how to run the company, organization, connect to networks, all of those anyway is help that an early stage investor would use. But in a term sheet, when you look at it, don't get a heart attack. It may look like there's so many conditions. I felt the same when I had the first one. First time I took a loan, small loan, the bank wanted to mortgage everything I owned. And so the first thing I did as soon as I could is pay off that loan because I didn't want my house to be mortgaged. So I would say don't get a heart attack, but understand there's a reason why those conditions are there. Talk to the investors, understand why they have a condition. Is it reasonable, not reasonable? If you have an issue, discuss it. Most of it is closed, like Ajay said. And actually, if you understand, if you take the trouble to understand, you may not have problem with most that are put there. But if you do have a problem with some, it is unfair, please raise it.
So that brings me to the difference between various kinds of investors. And Amitabh, do you want to talk about something on corporate investors or VCs, HNIs?
Yeah, nowadays, like there are multiple avenues of investments that are coming in. In fact, I will start even from more basic that nowadays, even the incubators, the Panditadis and ours included, we are also acting as investors. Like we, of course, invest government money. And then there are angel investors and VCs and corporate investors. And now many of the banks, in our case, HDFC Bank has tied up with us and they are presenting our good companies in front of their HNI customers. Now, will the negotiation vary for a startup when they are negotiating with their own incubator? So, that makes it very difficult for us. But, how about the startups? Because they're our babies in a way. Versus real world investors like the VCs and angel investors, corporate investors, HNIs. Do you propose that the negotiation strategy should vary? I'll first ask Dr. Srivastava and then I will move to Mr. Chaudhary.
So, when you're negotiating with your own incubator, that is the kind of negotiation that I talked about earlier.
Yes,
you're negotiating with
one.
That's an easy negotiation, right? But when you go out, it is quite different. So if you're negotiating with, let's say, people like Ajay or me, who've been both entrepreneurs, founders, have raised money, and are investing, it's a bit different kind of negotiation. Because yes, we would like a return on our investment because if we don't, if all our investments fail, then we would think that we are stupid. We don't want to look stupid. So we don't want to get a return on the investment. But we don't do angel investing as a source of livelihood. So, we are a lot more relaxed. And because we've been want the other shoe, we are a lot more empathetic about what we do, how we work at work. Amitabh, you saw that in Noka, in other companies, Ajay, me, we spend lots of time. That's a different negotiation. You can have a more straight negotiation. You go to VCs because we are largely investing our own money. Now, when it's VC money, then people are investing somebody else's money. They are answerable to somebody else. I can invest just because I like the idea as an individual, right? And if it fails, only I'm impacted. So it's fine. But if I'm investing your money, I'm answerable to you. So I have to be a lot more careful on what I can do, how much I can give, not give. So VCs are still financial investors, remember. So neither angel investors like Ajay or me, nor VC investors want to control your company. They're financial investors. The fund has a life. They just want you to give them a return. So if you're raising money from angels or early stage VCs, please be ready to talk to them about how you will give them a return. How will you give them an exit? That's why they're investing. When you go to a corporate or a strategic investor, it is different, right? So there's no end of period for a corporate. They may or may not be financial investors. There are corporates who may be investing just to get a return, but there are corporates who may be investing because they like their business and they wish to own it at some point. You have to be very clear what their objective is, because if that is the case, it means at some stage you should be ready to give up control. They may want a majority stake. Therefore, with them, you must negotiate how will you get your exit. When we are investing, Ajay and me as angels or VCs, we want to know how will we get an exit. Because we don't want to be left running your company. Because we won't be there. We have a shelf life for the fund. But for a corporate, you need to know that if they own majority, they can throw you out tomorrow. They can do whatever they like. How will you get your exit? Make sure you negotiate that. Do a lot of homework on who is the corporate? What is their track record on making investments in startups? How have they operated? Have they exercised day-to-day control? They let you run your organization in the way you would? You have to ask a lot of questions from corporate investors. It can be good for you because they can take you to the market. I mean, it's not the corporate investors are bad, don't get me wrong. It may be very good for you. Large corporates are investors. But there's a different set of questions that you need to think about. With the strategic investor or the corporate investor versus what you might ask angels and you might ask VCs. And also amongst corporates, some of them just have corporate venture funds. So they're like VC funds. They're not seeking to control. But you kind of need to understand, because at the end of it, people are putting in money, but you're putting in your life. So you better be sure what you want.
So, Ajay, just one aspect that Dr. Srivastava did not touch upon is that nowadays many HNIs are interested in investing in startups. And there it is also like angel investors, it is their own money they are trying to invest. But, they are not really angel investors. It is not something that they have been doing for a long time. So there is a rookie effect perhaps on either side. How do you negotiate there?
You see, HNIs, there are HNIs and there are HNIs. Some of them have proper investment offices. Okay, so they are family offices where there are proper investors and professional investors whom they hire and they work with the startups. So that's a very different category. There is another category where it is just that they are trying out this whole idea of investing in startups. So that is a very different kind of HNI where you may have a very controlling type of HNI investor typically. Now I'll give you an anecdote. The anecdote is that there was this lovely company that came to an HNI, and there were two CEOs, CEO and COO, both were ladies, and they went to this HNI, and they were very keen to invest in that fund. They wanted 10 crores, and the HNI said, yes, we agree to your valuation, and we will give you this money. And then what happened is that as the discussion progressed, the HNI asked his daughter to start sitting into the meeting. And after a while, it emerged that his fundamental objective was to get the daughter to start a business. And he really wanted to make sure that at some stage, the daughter takes a real position in the company and runs it, taking it over from the other two ladies who were actually running it, who were very professional. And both those ladies came to me and said, what do we do? I said, don't touch it. Because what will really happen is that you are going to be controlled upon. And immediately what I did was that I took that business to the IIN fund and we invested in it. And we are very happy with the investment. So, these kind of things are happening, and you have to be very wary that you don't allow such control to be there from HMIs.
So a little bit off topic because a lot of young entrepreneurs are in there, and some of you may know that I'm fairly active on Twitter. Just little bit extension of what Ajay mentioned, and this is a warning for all our young companies. One celebrated VC firm representative actually offered to invest in a company and said that, I will not do it myself, but I will get investment for you. So acting more like a well-wisher. And then in the guise of doing that, kept on getting information, more information, and even more information. And 6 months down the line, for all you know, that his wife started exactly the same business with same product, same price point, and so on and so forth. Therefore, it is slightly off topic, but in a country where law enforcement is very difficult, I don't think NDA will entirely work. Checking track record is very, very critical. Over to you, Anand.
No, I would just add, Amitabh, that see, the thing with NDAs is, take IIN. Ajay not part of it. We don't sign NDAs. But we don't sign NDAs because we see 10,000 people, entrepreneurs in a year, and then invest in 20, 30. So we sign NDAs, the whole world can be suing us after that. But checking the track record is key. Find out, because the thing is, if you're a good VC firm, if you're a good angel group, and you do this once, you steal somebody's idea.
Yeah,
that's then. Then game is over. Secondly, what happens is if you look at organized groups, let's say like the Angel Network, see, it's not in the business of running companies. It's in the business of investing in companies. So if Ajay or I wanted to create a company, we would do it. But that would be outside of the network. But in the network, we only invest. So there is no merit, there's no desire or no incentive to see like this. But when you're discussing with individuals, whether it's in HNI or a corporate, whether you're discussing with people whose main business is not that of investing in startups, you should do a lot more homework. Just make sure before you share too much, do that. I mean, in our case, for instance, we have a simple thing that we encourage entrepreneurs to look at our website. It's transparent. All the investors are listed there. And we say, look, if you're going to present something which you think may be a conflict of interest for one of our members, You tell us, and they will be asked not to be on that call. We've had lots of occasions when it hasn't happened, the entrepreneur started presenting, and one or the other of the angel investors has got up saying, listen, I'm sorry, I'm invested in something which is similar, or I'm looking at a company that's similar, so I will have to recuse myself from that. So in quality organized groups, you will have this in place, but you won't have it everywhere. So you should be without any.
So I'll cut in a little bit. Uh, we are all happy to note that there are 157 participants who are listening to the two pros, and I would now like to request Ajay to, like nowadays, as the slogan goes, that you make for India, make for the world. Okay, therefore, eventually you will be negotiating with international investors, international partners, and etc., etc. Of course, the overall framework that you have given, both of you, that is universal perhaps, but there are culture-specific, nuances that I am privy to from you, knowing at an informal level. If you would share that with all our companies, they will be very happy, and because they might be in that shoe very, very soon.
Well, actually, I've had a lot of experience dealing with both the Chinese and the Japanese. I pretty much, when I started the Singapore venture for HCL, and that was in the early 80s, I used to travel pretty much 5 to 6 times a year to China. And I've had a lot of experience dealing with them. Negotiation in China is pretty much like Chinese torture. And they take you through the whole process of negotiation for many, many days. It will not just finish in one day. And they will always make sure that if you have 4 people, they will have 10 people sitting across the table. So they will try and overpower you. And that's normal. And there will be an issue of an interpreter, whether it's Chinese or Japanese. So it's always good to have your own interpreter as well. And it's sometimes also good to have a person who understands the language across the table along with you in terms of your team. So that really helps. Because if you just have an interpreter, you're really not sure how the translation is happening. So I think these are important issues to look at. Typically, in a Chinese situation, you'll have 10, 12 people across the table. You have a discussion, negotiation, you make a presentation, you give a price for your product, and then suddenly they will go to the board and say, this is the price we want. And the negotiation stops there because that's not the price that you can actually give. They know that. And they just get up and go. And then you need to somehow, through various sources, get back to them by the evening and say, hey, can we meet again? Let's discuss it again. So next morning, they again meet up, and then the discussion carries on, and then they go to the board and put another number, which is also not possible. So it goes on like this. Okay, so you got to observe how they're sitting, who's sitting where, and who is the real person who will take the decision. Okay, so once in a particular table, right at the edge of the table, somebody was sitting in civilian clothes. It turned out he was the general, very, very senior there, who was negotiating on behalf of the army. And he was in civilian clothes, but he was the most important guy, and we never talked to him. Till we discovered right at the end that he was the most important guy to influence. So in the case of Chinese, there will be a hierarchy in which the decision gets taken. And that hierarchy you should understand. All right. They will also play games with you. They know that you don't have a hotel booking more than 3 days. And those days, hotels were very difficult to get. So they will drag the discussion till the last evening of the stay that you can get into Beijing, after which you have to leave. So, these are the kind of tricks that they play. Next time when we learned all this, we had booked ourselves into 2 separate hotels. And first time the 3 days ended, we said, okay, we walked away. And we went to the other hotel. So, these are the kind of things they will do. The Japanese are very different. There is a very clear, and of course, both of them, Chinese and Japanese, they just don't display any emotion. You just have two eyes looking at you and a very flat face. And there's absolutely no way you can figure out what they're thinking. But in the case of Japanese, it's a combined decision. It's not a single person decision. So you need to make sure that you are able to convince literally everybody. If you find that somebody is not looking convinced, please take extra effort to convince that person, because it becomes very important. And one of the critical aspects of Japanese and Chinese culture is saving face. So if they've made a statement and you try and unnecessarily fight it, you will have trouble because they want to save face. They've made a statement and it's very difficult for them to go back from there. So don't put them in a corner unnecessarily. And lastly, if they make a statement in Japan to say, looks difficult to do, they're fundamentally saying no. So you should understand that that's the kind of cultures that you're dealing with. And always speak very slowly. Don't try and rush through your presentation or talk. Make sure that you speak word by word and ensure that when it's translated by their interpreter, give enough respect and time for that interpreter to properly explain them. So these are some of the points that I would
Let me add a thing on the Japanese, because I had a similar example. We had a team, we were trying to sell a certain project to them. The team came and it had, I think, 5 people or whatever. And there were 2 people who were leading the discussions, very articulate, spoke English well. And then they had a slightly older gentleman also was there, not that well dressed, and kind of sleepy throughout. So we were focused on these 2 guys who were doing that, discussing. We did all that discussion. And this was a 3 days I was spending with us. And in the evening, we took them out for dinner. This was in Bombay. And this was, I forget, I think in one of the restaurants at the Taj. So there we were sitting and talking, and at the next table, there was a whole group of people who were Oriental. I didn't know that they were Chinese or Japanese or Korean. Making a lot of noise. Somebody's birthday, screaming, shouting, whatever it is. And we were not able to talk. So I happened to make a comment saying, really noisy group. I made some comment which was not very complimentary, saying, look, don't seem to have manners and whatever. And after a while, this older guy, he just leaned over to them and he just said 2, 3 things to them in Japanese. The rest of the evening, there was no noise from that table. It just stopped. And it kind of told us that this was not some, admin guy they've carried along. We made very sure next 2 days that we were just as nice to him as we were to everybody else. And when I was working in IBM, a legal head at IBM, and IBM had very, very strong legal counsel, and this was a guy who has a doctorate in jurisprudence from Harvard, and very few people get that. He was telling me that he was posted in Japan and then he was posted in Australia. He said in Japan, a lot like what Ajay was saying, they wear you down. They keep talking to him, and he said they'll have a translator and they'll say this is what we're saying, and then you would say something the opposite, and a guy would stand up and say, okay, so this is what you said, which was completely not what you said. And they would keep doing it, and eventually you would say, okay, let me just get the minimum that I get. And so it was what he was. Then he got transferred, and he was in Australia. He went into this negotiation. And like Japan, he made lots of preparation, saying, okay, I'll ask for this. If this doesn't happen, then here, this is my need, this is my want, this is my, I can live with, and walk. He did all that. He went to this team, 4 Australians in the room. started negotiating. He laid out his position. He says, they look at each other. Then one of the guys said, "Sounds good, mate. Done." He said after that he couldn't sleep for a week because he didn't know what he had given away. He said, they accepted my first piece. God alone knows I could have asked for more. So I think people have very different styles of negotiating. And just like saving face is a big issue in Japan and in China, in America they don't really care. Bottom line, it's the money. Do they have a good deal? They don't have a good deal.
Dipandita, since time is running out, you are muted, Dipandita.
Yes. How much time do we have? I think we are kind of short on time. So do we take
a couple of questions?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Do we take questions from participants or do I ask one question?
I have already you over WhatsApp 2 questions.
Okay, I didn't say that. Okay, let me just check that out.
Please.
Oh yeah, I've got it. So interesting. Let me first put this question. Could you please share about BioAngel's network? It was announced last year, but I wasn't able to connect with the group while pitching to IIN Network after multiple rounds of diligence by IIN investment team. So this is a question for Saurav, of course.
Well, both of us actually. Yeah, because BioAngel's network is in the process of getting established.
Uh-huh.
So it's not there yet. It's in the process of getting established. And what it will do is today we are doing a lot of biotech deals within IIN. So anybody who has an idea, please come pitch. In the IIN fund, for instance, I think probably a third of what we've done is in something to do with healthcare. So feel free. But the biotech angels is in the process of getting set up. And once that happens, that will happen in a few weeks or a month or so. Then if it's the biotech idea, you would go pitch directly. But you'll know about it. We will.
Okay, so that's very encouraging. In any case, you said 1/3 of your investments are in healthcare life sciences and will have a dedicated fund. So that's extremely encouraging. So there's a question which kind of was answered, but since it's put, I'll just say, from the first time angel investors are traditional businessmen, like HNIs that Ajay talked about, who may or may not understand the trajectory of technology business. How should the startup negotiate? The question is coming to their mind, if somebody has a pot of money but really does not understand technology, what kind of negotiations happen? And here before you say, I've seen corporates negotiate in a very different way than VCs and angels, because corporates have a strategy of investing only when they want to integrate that technology forward. So the discussion that you have with a corporate is much more technology oriented than valuation oriented, because that's where you have to, the science and the technology has to align for a corporate before they can discuss anything else. In case of an HNI or anybody who has a pot of money but does not understand technology, how would you approach?
Well, actually, a lot of times it doesn't happen like that, because I have noticed that HNIs earlier were very different, but today HNIs have also become quite reasonably professional, because they don't want to go and invest anywhere. They will invest in areas that they understand. And it doesn't really happen that, they don't understand the technology and they're trying to invest. It doesn't really happen that way, because they won't be interested in investing. That's what I've seen. And I think don't be scared about this at all. I mean, if you feel that it's just a pot of money that you're looking for, go ahead and pitch. And if they want to take the risk, they will take the risk and invest without even knowing the technology. But this rarely happens.
At times it's gut feel. Because they're into business, they may have a gut feel, even if they don't understand the nuances, deep nuances of science. They may understand the markets well enough to decide on investment. So I think I would at least say, do not disregard just because somebody is not very well trained in technology. They may have a very keen investment, because they may be investing for a long time. They may have a sense of market. So of course,
if I may say so, if they're investing for a good return, they may not understand your technology specifically. And if you are doing something that's never been done before, quite likely they won't. That's okay. What you should be able to get them to understand is how this will make money. What will be the end point? What will be the outcome? What will this do? What problem will it solve? Why there is a big market? Why you are the right people to crack that market? So the tech is a piece of the puzzle. Unlike a corporate, they're not trying to acquire a tech.
absolutely.
They're trying to invest for a return. So you have to put that piece of technology that you have in the context of a business that will give them a great return. That is what you need to do. It doesn't matter if they don't understand that small piece of technology.
Absolutely. And that is negotiation. That is the art. That's why negotiation is an art more than a science. With that, I pass on to Amitabh to say whether we conclude the session now, because we have exceeded the time.
Yeah, we have exceeded the time, and Dr. Srivastav actually had a hard stop at 1 p.m. I am very, very happy that he decided to stay on, and the innovators definitely benefited from this session a lot. I am getting a lot of thumbs up on the other side. I think Panditaji, we should thank both Ajay and Dr. Srivastav, and we should conclude this session now, and we will certainly keep connected to both of you, because not only just IIT Kanpur, the entire BiG ecosystem will benefit a lot from your wisdom and your guidance and mentorship. So
Absolutely.
it will bother you a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I hand over to Amita.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for joining the session today. It was really thought-provoking and very lively. And we'll take a quick break now. I would request all the participants to join back the session at 2 o'clock sharp. We may end the session. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Amita.
Bye.